Welcome to the Successful Life Podcast. I'm your host, Corey Barrier. This show is your go-to resource for real stories, expert insights, and proven strategies that empower you to break free from addiction, rebuild your life, and become the strongest version of yourself, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Each week, I'll bring you conversations with guests and thought leaders who have walked the path of recovery and personal growth. Whether you're navigating sobriety, seeking mental clarity, or building daily discipline, you're in the right place. Let's get into today's episode. And don't forget to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to help others find the show.
It's Corey Barrier, yeah, come learn with me. Take you down the path of our journeys. This is the successful life. It's time to take what you learned, apply it to your life. It's your turn to live a successful life. You are tuning in to the Successful Life Podcast. 3, 2, 1, let's go.
Welcome to the Successful Life Podcast. I'm your host, Corey Barrier. And today, folks, we're going to talk about the leadership mindset as it pertains to selling, sobriety, and self-mastery. So leadership isn't a title. It's a decision. And let's just talk about leadership for a second. Not the kind that comes with, a big name or CEO or owner or president or whatever, right? There's no title. I'm not talking about leadership that comes with a title. I'm talking about leadership when nobody else is watching. When it's just you, your thoughts, and the next hard choice that you've got to make. And, leadership is a mindset. And here's the truth that most people miss. The best leaders aren't always in the boardrooms or in the head of the office or at the head of the table or ringing the NASDAQ bell. They're forged in rooms of recovery. Because leadership's not about ownership. There's nothing in business that teaches you ownership like recovery. See, a sales team without leadership is absolute chaos. And a life without leadership is a relapse. And in both, the goal's the same. Show up differently than you did yesterday. We know the saying, do the same thing. If you do the same thing expecting different results is insanity. Now, guess what? I've had a front row seat at insanity in relationships, in recovery, in jobs, in friendships. And sometimes we pick people who are a lot like us. Now, in rooms of recovery, everybody's the same, right? Everybody's there for a common reason. And that is, in my case, to not drink. Or at least that's how it starts out. The truth of the matter is, when you get into recovery, the main goal is to stop drinking, right? That's the main goal. But it's all the life stuff that happens after that. And believe me, dude, life stuff is going to happen, whether you're in recovery or not. We just so happen to have a nice framework to go by when these things go sideways. And so, on the surface, sales and recovery, they may look worlds apart, but they're really not. One's about closing deals, one's about staying alive, but the principles are almost identical. In sales, we say you can't control the customer, only your process. And in recovery, we say you can't control people, places, or things, only your actions. In both of those scenarios, the secret is surrender. You stop trying to control the outcome and start focusing on consistency in your sales process, consistency in your recovery. And listen, if you're like me, and most salespeople are unorganized, most people in recovery are unorganized. They don't, people in recovery and salespeople don't have a lot of consistency in their lives. Now, I'm not speaking about every salesperson in the world, but as a general rule, sales is sometimes an up and down game depending on what sales you're in. Recovery is a game of ups and downs. It's how you handle those ups and downs on both fronts. Depends on how successful you are. A leadership mindset means that you stop blaming other people, the customer, the weather, your boss, and you start asking, what can I do to grow from this? What could I have done better? How could I have approached this differently? And that's not weakness. That's getting towards that mastery skill. Because if you don't ask for feedback, you're going to think you're doing everything the right way. Well, I handled that whole sale the right way and they still didn't buy. That's where the blame game comes in. If you don't have somebody to guide you through your recovery process, you think that you're doing it right because it's you and you think that you're right about everything. I thought I was right about everything. That's why I have to check in with people. That's why you have a sales manager. That's why you have somebody in recovery that helps you. That's why you have people in recovery that you can call and say, hey, am I looking at this the right way? You want to stop blaming people. It's not somebody else's fault that you can't get your shit together in sales or in recovery. And so, the part that has been really important in my recovery and in my leadership positions in different organizations is emotional sobriety. Now, you may or may not have heard of emotional sobriety. I'm sure you've heard of emotional intelligence. Well, emotional sobriety is kind of the same thing, right? You don't take things so personal. You don't get offended when someone says something that doesn't align with what you think it should, right? Here's something nobody teaches in sales training. The most profitable skill you can ever learn is emotional regulation. The ability to stay calm when the deal goes sideways. Stay curious instead of being reactive. Take a pause before you panic. And that's emotional sobriety. It's the bridge between recovery and leadership. When I was early in my recovery, I used to chase every emotion like it was a fire that I had to put out. And then one day I realized emotions don't need management. I don't need to manage somebody else's emotions. I need to understand their emotions and my emotions. The same way a customer doesn't need pressure, they need empathy. And when you master that mindset, you stop selling from fear and you start leading from trust. And the same thing in recovery. You stop living in fear and you start trusting yourself. And when you start trusting yourself, you start trusting other people. But it starts with you. All of it starts with you. You know, when you think about the power of humility and feedback in recovery, you learn really fast. You cannot grow if you can't be honest. I believe this is the same thing in sales. You know, the best salespeople are coachable. They don't take feedback personally, they take it professionally. And humility is a superpower in leadership. You know, if somebody says, "Oh, you did a great job, fantastic. What could I have done better?" The ego says, and I talk about the ego all the time because it's very familiar with the ego. The ego says, "Oh, I know. I know I did good. Yeah, I know I did good." But a leader says, "Teach me." And that's exactly what I'm talking about. How can I'm good, or I know I'm good, or how can I get better? Even if you're even if you're the CEO of the company, you can always get better. And that's what separates the top 1% of people in sales, not personality, not product knowledge, but the willingness to put in the work to keep learning. Hey there, quick reminder. If you're enjoying the Successful Life podcast, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Right now, only 53% of our listeners are subscribed. And that means nearly half of you might miss out on new episodes as soon as they drop. Subscribing is free, it helps us grow, and it ensures you stay up to date with every insight packed conversation. So pause for a second, hit subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening, and let's keep building that successful life together. And if recovery taught me anything, it's that pride isolates you. Humility connects you with other people, and connection always closes in business and in life. Listen, I wouldn't survive if I didn't have the people in my life, in my circle, in my recovery circle that I have. It's the most powerful thing that I have are people that I can call and say, "Am I looking at this the right way?" And it does take a bit of humility because they may not give you the answer that you think. And you got to be okay with that. You got to be okay with getting feedback. And if you get good feedback, ask what you could have done better. And there's always something that you can do better. You got to lead yourself first. You know, you can't lead a team if you can't show them a model of what they need to be doing. If you're the sales manager or the service manager at a company, you can't be a good leader by telling people what to do. You've got to, you want to be able to show them, you want to be able to model for them how it should be done. You can't lead a customer if you don't listen to them. And you sure as hell can't lead others if you can't lead yourself. Leadership mindset starts with daily habits. Do you show up to the meeting on time? Do you practice honesty in every area of your life? What standards are you setting when nobody else is watching? It's one thing to do things when you're in front of people. But if you're a different person when you're out of the office or out of the rooms or, away from everybody, then you're living a double life. And I'm telling you firsthand, I've tried that and it doesn't work. Because people don't follow what you say. They follow who you are and what you stand for. In recovery, I had to learn how to show up when I didn't feel like it. And in sales, it's exactly the same thing. It's just like when I go to the gym and lift weights, I'm building muscle through reps. Leadership is exactly the same thing. You're not always going to get it right, but you got to get up and try again. In recovery, it's the same way. There are not a lot of people that go show up for a recovery program and get it right the first time. In fact, most people don't. And if they would have stopped after that first relapse, their lives would be completely destroyed. Thank God that didn't happen for me. And thank God I got back up, as painful as it was. And I'm not tooting my own horn. I was just in enough pain. I didn't want to go through it anymore. And that was my driving force. I didn't want any more of what I was getting. So I had to do something different. And I couldn't lead myself when that happened. All I could do is get up and show up. And sometimes in sales, you just have to show up. That's half the battle. If you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your own preparation. If you're not prepared for your day, you're going to show up less than what you could. If I don't prepare for this podcast, it's going to be all over the place. Do you know how I realized that? Because I did it the other way for so long, and the download sucked. And I would go back, and I still go back and listen to this podcast. I will go back and listen to this one after it's over. Because I want to understand, how do I sound? How are my voice inflections? Do I sound like a dickhead? Do I sound humble? Do I sound like I would want to listen to me? And I'm harder on myself probably than anybody else could ever be. But I want to make sure that I'm putting out the best possible podcast that I can put out. At some point as a leader, your mindset shifts from achievement to contribution. You start realizing that, the mission is not just about your numbers, it's about the impact that you get to make. And in recovery, we call that service. In sales, we call it value. And both mean exactly the same thing, which is putting people first. There are times when I don't want to go to a meeting, but I go. There are times when the phone rings that I don't want to answer it, but I answer it. Because maybe somebody on the other line needs to have a conversation, and maybe they are just calling to check in. But most of the time, the second that I think to myself, I don't want to pick up this phone, that's when that person needs me the most. And I've done it so many times now, it's almost like a trigger. It's almost like I know the person is calling because they have something heavy on their heart. Or maybe they're going through something that I've been through in the past. It's just like in sales, when you do finish a sale and that that this person's going to benefit from what you've sold them, it's a good feeling. It's an empty feeling when you just sell something to be selling it. And you should be ashamed if that's what you're doing. And I really don't care what you sell. If you don't genuinely want to help people, they feel it. They feel it. I mean, look, we hear the old adage, a used car salesman, when you pull up on the lot and you're driving a minivan and the guy's like, "Hey, I got a brand new Porsche over here." And you're like, "Dude, I'm driving a minivan with Fruit Loops all over it." And he's like, "Yeah, but this Porsche is right up your alley. It's exactly what you need, Mr. Customer." You're like, "Who is this idiot? Who is this idiot? Does he have zero awareness? Can he not pick up on anything? Clearly not. All he cares about is selling you that Porsche. He didn't even think to stop to ask you a question, right?" And that's, if you may be showing up the same way in your business or in your recovery. If you're trying to solve one of your sponsees' problems and that's not even their problem, they understand that you really don't care about them. All you care about is talking or trying to figure something out for them that they don't even care about. It's the same thing. So, the best leaders don't sell products. They sell the belief. They transfer their energy into the customer and show people what's possible. The leadership mindset isn't a one-time thing. It's a daily discipline. And every day you choose to stay teachable. Every day you choose gratitude over ego. Every day you show up on time, prepared and humble. That's what builds credibility, not your title. Who gives a shit about your title? Nobody gives a shit about your title but you. People that are humble and prepared and show up on time and gratitude over ego, they don't even tell you what their title is. Hell, I know owners that won't even tell the customer they're the owner because they just want to be seen as another guy on the team. That's real humility. That's real humility. Because then that customer doesn't get watered down by the title of that individual. And that's really cool when that happens. Leadership in sales and recovery is about becoming predictable in your integrity. People should know when you say something that you mean it. Because leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about being consistent. And the most consistent thing you can do is show up for yourself every damn day. There's a freedom in leadership. When I finally got sober, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, I realized leadership wasn't about control. It was about alignment with a purpose, alignment with my honesty, alignment with my values. And when you're aligned, the right deals, people, and opportunities show up. And that's what a leadership mindset really is, showing up with clarity, humility, and heart, and in recovery and in business. Because when you lead yourself first, the rest of life falls into place. And I'm going to leave you with that today. I appreciate you listening, and share this with somebody that you think might need it. Subscribe to the podcast. Leave us a review. It always helps. And truly, I'm grateful that you listen every week to the show. Like, it really makes my day to know that other people actually want to listen to something I have to say, because I can tell you for years, people didn't give a shit what I said. And I don't blame them, because I showed up with a bunch of ego, a bunch of selfishness, and I wasn't humble at all. And don't get me wrong, I sometimes even get into ego now, for sure. But my goal is to recognize that, lead myself, and course correct as quickly as I see that. So I appreciate you guys. We drop this podcast every Friday morning at 4 a.m. We'll see you guys next week. I appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next week. That's a wrap for today's episode of the Successful Life Podcast. If you found value in this conversation, make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode at successfullifepodcast.com. And if you're enjoying the show, we'd love for you to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. It really helps us reach more people looking to build a successful life. Stay focused, stay driven, and we'll see you next time.
If you took anything away from this podcast, make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and go check out some other episodes on successfullifepodcast.com. This is the Successful Life.